Let's go on the other side of the town to the Rams. Talk about the Rams, Jackie. The Rams have a lot of work ahead of them. What they've lost so many players
13
and
guys.
defected outside, either gone to another team, retired. I mean, you talked about their special teams, Jackie. Their entire defense is gone except Aaron Donald. Offensively, yeah, they've got some holes to fill. But what are they going to do in the draft picks? They have of 1 second and 2/3. That's it in the first 4 rounds. What do they do? Where do they go from
We
here?
talked about it last week, Vince, and what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to go out and draft diamonds in the rough. They're going to draft guys that has a wow factor that probably no one else is looking at, which means that staff of Sneeds should have been combing through the country looking for different guys all year long and probably still are. But when you think about the Rams, the thing that concerns me more than anything else is where they're going to have to replace their talent. Now we saw over this past season with Andrew Whitworth gone, with Noteboom getting hurt, with a couple other guys leaving via free agency the year before, we saw how miserable a football team that the Rams can be when their offensive line isn't functioning. So the first thing they're going to have to do is they're going to have to shore up their offensive line. They're going to have to draft some guards, draft some tackles, draft some depth, draft some stars, look for some wow factor, all of that.
Jackie, go find somebody in the rough, like you said.
Well, they did that a year ago. The guy who finished playing left tackle for them a year ago was a free agent, a traveling free agent. He's been on multiple teams with a handful of starts over a long period of time, and he did okay.
Now, let me ask you a question. Do guys really have to play Division I football to get drafted? I mean, can't Division II? There's 3. There's some guys that never played football, Jackie. Why can't you go out and find somebody in the offensive line and work with these guys?
If he's never played football and you're talking about using him as an offensive lineman, you better not do that. Because you're liable to get somebody killed, graveyard dead.
Yeah, if he's big enough, it covers the ground.
If they think Matthew Stafford had a pain in his neck that radiated down his arm last year, I can only imagine what would happen if you put incompetent people up there to deal with some of these pass rushers. But the thing that concerns me about the Rams more than anything else is that this is what I know, Vince. 2 of the most highly skilled positions on any football team has to be their offensive line and their secondary. The offensive line and their secondary. Not only do they have to acquire an unusual amount of skill to be successful at their positions, but they also have to have a mindset. They have to have a mindset that understands where the next guy is supposed to be and what he is supposed to be doing so that you play in concert. Those 2 positions have to play in concert, perhaps more than any other position, with perhaps the connection of a good wide receiver and a quarterback. Unfortunately for the Rams, we saw a depletion of their offensive line a year ago and them having to play with a makeshift offensive line. This year now, Vince, if you look at the guys that they lost in their secondary, just take a look at the guys that they lost in their secondary, Vince. It's amazing to me. They lost Taylor Rapp.
Yes.
They lost Jalen Ramsey. They lost David Long, a cornerback, and they lost Nick Scott. So they lost 2 safeties in Rapp and Scott, and they lost 2 really good corners in Ramsey and Long. Right. That is going to be a chore replacing those guys, and let alone getting them to play, where they're right here with one another mentally. So that's going to be an issue. Now, the other thing that I saw,
and not to mention a future Hall of Famer in Bobby Wagner and Terrell Davis. Terrell
Lewis.
Yeah.
Terrell Lewis and Leonard Floyd. Don't forget about Leonard
Floyd as well.
Leonard Floyd was a special pass rusher when you gave him support.
Right.
And then we saw what Bobby Wagner did, get 6 sacks, most he's ever had in his career, went to the Pro Bowl and all that. He's gone. That leadership is gone. So it's going to be new guys there between the defensive line and the secondary. Now, the other thing, Vince, you heard it talked about all the time. You and I have heard it talked about all the time. You win football games in the NFL with offense, defense, and special teams.
Yes.
Don't leave out special teams. If you look at what the Rams have got to do, they have got to replace their deep snapper, Azusa Pacific University's own Matt Orzich. He left the Rams. He was their deep snapper. He snapped on punts and his field goals and PATs. They lost their punter, Riley Dixon. That's another guy, and that's another component that they've got to get used to. They lost their number 1 returner in Brandon Powell. Remember how dynamic he was down the stretch, making big plays? And then Vince on
Their
top
MVP.
and then absolutely,
Matt Gay.
yeah, absolutely, they lost Matt Gay. So they lost the punter, they lost the kicker, they lost the snapper, and they lost the best returner that they had on their roster. So to me, when I look at the Rams rebuild, whatever it is they're calling it, as they move toward 2024, because 2024 the Rams have more available cap space than any team in the NFL. So they're going to get their spending done this year and next year, and hopefully it'll be rolling the year after that. But these two positions, in my opinion, historically have been the positions that you don't mess with. You might replace a piece here and there, but you don't make wholesale changes.
They got a lot of places.
You don't make
A lot of
wholesale changes there.
replace,
But
Jackie.
Vince, and you know, this is what I know. The people that are making these decisions for the Rams, they understand exactly what I just said. They understand the camaraderie. They understand the cohesiveness that has to exist in these two groups in particular. But still, they allowed all of this to happen, which tells me that they have a plan in place to bring in some talent, to bring in some guys to deploy along with the coaching staff they have in place right now. I happen to know that their offensive line coach is a dynamic guy. He played with the Patriots. He is really, really special. And, you know, he's their new line coach. I can't call his name right now, but he is really good. He played with Matthew and played in a few Super Bowls there at New England. So he's going to do a fantastic job building this group back up. But it remains to be seen how the cohesiveness, how quickly that comes with these two groups, because that is absolutely critical, Vince. It's absolutely
Hope they
critical.
make the right decisions.
And we're going to trust as Ram fans and season ticket holders
We need
as
to get
you
some
are
players.
that that's exactly what they're going to do. Now, Vince,